Well, hello, everyone. Forgive me for the microphone and how loud it is, but we are videotaping, and my friend Ryan has informed us that we need to use the mics so that it is sufficiently captured on video. We hope to post this video online and archive it online for folks who couldn't be here or for anyone to revisit at any time they want. Well, welcome to Pocopson Elementary School. My name is Cliff Beaver. It is entirely my privilege to be the principal here at this school and to welcome you to Pocopson. And I want to thank you for coming out tonight. There are lots of competing things in our lives, but I'm so glad that you made your way here tonight. And I'm just here by way of introduction. I'm going to introduce an amazing team of folks who have some really great information to share for you. And I sound really loud, and I apologize about that. I'll come down just a little bit. Ryan, can I pull it a little bit down? Okay. We are very, very glad to let you know that with school board support and administrative support, and I will out them right now, Dr. Sandville and Mr. Nolan are in the back of the gymnasium there. Thank you for your support, gentlemen, with this program. In fact, it all started with them. Our school district is partnering with the Franklin Institute for a special professional development series over the course of years. And if I can just go through some of these wheels for you, I'll share what's happening. So back in 2015, Dr. Sandville took our entire group of school administrators from across the district to a professional development day. We met Julia, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute, and we had the privilege of a day of in-service on neuroscience and how can neuroscience research and literature impact practice in the classroom. We've had K-12 cohorts of teachers attend as well between that time and up to present day. In fact, we're about ready to launch another cohort coming up next year. So we are very excited about that, which leads us to what we're currently doing as well. And the rest of the folks I'm going to introduce you to is we're part of this Master Educators program. There are 5 school districts working very closely with the Franklin Institute with a special four-part professional development series over the course of the year that we can bring our learnings back to our staff here at Pocopson. So I invite you to enjoy tonight's presentation. You can see that we are pictured in there. We didn't know that was going to happen. Julia threw those pictures of us in there just, I think, recently. So without further from me, I would like to introduce our team. To my right is Julia Skolnick. She is actually, Julia, I don't know your title, but I'm sure that she is the Director of Professional Development from the Franklin Institute. And to my left, Miss Erica Johnson, 4th grade teacher here at Pocopson, Mrs. Catherine Markloff, 4th grade teacher here at Pocopson, and Mr. John Wagner, 4th grade teacher at Chadds Ford Elementary. So the 4 of us have had the privilege of being the UCFSD representatives to the Master Educator Series going on at the Franklin Institute this year. So I would like to introduce Julia. She's going to launch this presentation, and you're going to hear from all these fine folks all evening. And at the end, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers. And even further still, if you have questions at the very end, and we do have an evaluation half sheet there for you, please jot down any thoughts or notes, questions, concerns, inquiries on the backside if you need some room, and we will be glad to follow up with that. Okay? So thank you for coming. It's great to see you. And this is Julia Skolnick from the Franklin Institute.
Thank you very much, Cliff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right, thank you for hosting me. It was a nice trip out here, and when I looked up on the hill, I thought to myself, wow, is that an elementary school? It looks like a castle, or something important must be happening here. So I'm very pleased to be here. How many people have been to the Franklin Institute Science Museum in Philadelphia? Has anybody not been? Oh, all right, let's change that. Let's talk later. So the Franklin Institute is a science museum in Philadelphia. We've been around a really long time. We have many great exhibits. We have the giant heart that's been around for 50 plus years. Most recently, we have our brain exhibit where you can climb through the brain. We have a giant telescope where you can look through to see the sun safely and stars and planets, or the Philadelphia Science Festival where we do explosions on the Parkway. And our core our mission is to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology. And so to give you a little background on myself and why we're doing this work, so my background is in elementary education and cognitive science and psychology and neuroscience. And so as I was planning on becoming a classroom teacher and learning about education, I always thought it was really critical to understand the brain. How can I be a great teacher if I don't understand how learning and memory works in the brain? And I didn't have enough of that in my teacher preparation. And so when we got the brain exhibit, we had a grant from the NIH to do outreach related to the brain. And that was really the birth of this professional development for educators around the brain. And so since 2014, we've been partnering with school districts in the region. Unionville-Chadsford was one of the first and one of our strongest district partners. And I've had the pleasure of working with so many administrators and teachers, and we're just thrilled about this partnership. And the idea is that we're trying to translate things we know about the brain from neuroscience, cognitive science, psychology research, education research, to people who really need to know it, including educators and now parents. And this is the very first of this type of session, thanks to the creativity of your teachers who are part of our Master Educator program. So it's a bit of a pilot test, and we want to learn what the experience is like for parents, but it all comes back to this idea: inspiring people to become passionate about learning about science and technology. And tonight, it's becoming passionate about better understanding the brain to make good choices for children, both in school and at home. Okay. So in any session that I do, and I think about learners across the lifespan. So at the museum, yes, we work with kids. We also work with adults. We work with families. We're all learners. So anytime we have a learning session, the learning sciences research suggests it's important to outline the goals. Why are we here? What do we want to learn about? So we're going to do that. First, and a very important goal, we're going to separate truth from myth about how our brains work. There is a lot of information out there, and sometimes you hear we're in a post-truth world, so it doesn't always matter what the facts are. It doesn't always matter what the truths are. In education, it's much too important for us to play around with that. We need to know what's truth, what's not, so we can make good choices for our children. Then you're going to hear from your teachers, teacher representatives, about the ways that they are using this information about the brain to change their instruction. And then lastly, we want to give you some things to think about with how you can support your children at home with this information. All right, so what fun would it be to learn about the brain without actually using ours for a couple of minutes? So what I want to do, if you have enough space, I want to ask everybody to stand up for a moment, if you would. Okay, now this involves a partner activity. We're just gonna get our brains fired up. It's a little late at night. We need something to juice ourselves up. So turn to somebody near you. Can be someone you know, someone you don't know. You need a partner. I'm gonna go up a little bit higher. All right, one person in your partnership, raise your hand. This is test number one. Only one partner, raise your hand. Okay, that partner, do as I do. Put your arms out in front of you with the backs of your hands facing each other. Cross over, link your fingers, and pull them up through. Okay, now other partner. Point at one of your partner's fingers without touching it, and that original partner needs to raise it up. And keep trying different fingers. All right, now we're going to switch partners. So other partner who hasn't done this yet, raise your hand. Put your hands out like this. Cross over, link them up, pull them through. Now other partner, try to point to your partner's fingers without touching them, and you have to lift them up. Is everybody ready for another challenge? right, we have two more challenges for you. This one is called L to I. These are not going to be partner challenges, the next two. So everybody put one hand out with your pointer and your thumb in the shape of an L. The other hand make an I with your pinky finger. There we go. And now switch. So you make an L with the I hand and an I with the L hand. And then switch again. And switch again. All right, where's the camera? This is such a good picture. Samville, come to the front and take a picture from here. This is a really good picture. Keep going. Is anybody getting it? And this doesn't count. The I love you, that doesn't count.
Oh, come on, Joe, you do better than that.
Do you get it? This is great. A sea of L to I's.
Awesome.
All right, and we've got one more. If you need a little space, or turn to the side because you need a little foot room. So for this one, put your right foot in the air a little bit and make a clockwise circle with your foot. Everybody got that part? All right, stick your right finger out and make a 6. What happens to your foot? That's the hardest one, yeah. All right, very good. You can sit down. All right, very well done, everyone. Can I ask for a volunteer, why do you think those were so tricky? Does anybody have a guess? Two different things happening at the same time. Are you used to seeing your fingers all mixed up like that? Are you used to doing L to I's every morning? Has anybody ever done that before? No. These are very odd things to do. They mix up our brain. But do you think if you practice those every day, you might get better at them? I'm sure you would, yes, and we're going to learn why. So feel free to use these in any context in your life that this brings you a little bit joy. You can use those. Okay. All right, so here's the exciting part of what I'm going to be talking about tonight, truth or myth. And through all of our work about the brain and with educators, we realize it's very hard to progress unless you deal with some of these very prevalent issues that are out there. So I'm going to present to you 4 ideas, and I want you to think to yourself for a moment if you believe these to be true or false. So the first idea, we use 10% of our brain. That's out there a lot. A lot of people say it, a lot of people hear it. The idea that we only use a small percentage of our brain. The second one is that we can effectively multitask. We can do many things at one time that take focus. So if you're doing a couple things at one time, they all take focus. We can do that. The third idea is right brain versus left brain. So if you're more artistic, more creative, free spirit, you use the right hemisphere of your brain more. If you're more logical, analytical, you use the left hemisphere of your brain more. And lastly, that people have set learning styles, so that you're an auditory learner, a visual learner, kinesthetic learner. And I do have to make the caveat that this excludes learning disabilities. So we're not going to be talking about learning disabilities tonight, but in typical development, that learning styles are associated with how your brain is developed. So I want you to take a second, think about whether you think these things are truth or myth. And then what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about the brain, and we're going to come back to these things and see what you think about them. All right? Okay. So what we're looking at here is 1/2 of the brain. So it's one hemisphere of the brain. It's the left side. So it's as if you're looking at my brain and you're only seeing this side, but there's double of everything you see here. So we've got the left frontal lobe, the left parietal lobe, but there's a right frontal lobe and a right parietal lobe. And as I say, because if a child were to look at this, would a child believe that your brain is multicolored? Yeah, so your brain is not actually colored in the way this picture might lead you to believe, but there are natural fissures in the brain that do group by structure and function, so that's why they're color-coded that way. All right, so the frontal lobe is responsible for things like planning, judgment, and executive functioning, higher order thinking. Does anybody have a guess at what age, on average, the frontal lobe matures? 20-something, 25? Any other guesses? All right, so on average, it is around age 25. But when I say mature, that does not mean behaviorally mature, it means physiologically mature. So it means that the connections from that lobe to the other lobes are more finite, they're more defined, does not correlate with behavior necessarily. So I make the joke, it's not as though people wake up on their 25th birthday and make great decisions, that's not the way it works, but the physiological maturity. And that has implications for teens and for younger children. So being able to make decisions by considering long-term consequences, it's not as though younger people are unable to make those kinds of choices, but it means there are other parts of their brain that are ramped up more for, high risk, high reward type of behaviors, where the frontal lobe is a little quieter, saying that may not be a good idea. But the other parts of the brain are like, yes, this will feel so great, I want to do it. So that's the balance that's happening as the teen brain matures. Okay, parietal lobe is responsible for processing sensory information. The occipital lobe in the rear is responsible for processing vision. Temporal lobe is responsible for language and auditory processing. And then the bottom of our brain, the cerebellum and brainstem, help us with primal functioning, like breathing, balance, and temperature. And it's not so important that you remember all the specific functions of the different regions of the brain, but the idea is if you look at all of those functions, we actually need our entire brains over the course of a day. It's helping us with not only higher order thinking, but things like digestion and breathing and sense of smell and all the things that we need to do in our daily life. So we do use our whole brains over the course of a single day. And also, while different regions are working in concert, our attention actually cannot be split in two directions. So when your frontal lobe needs to focus on something like writing an email or texting or watching oncoming traffic, you can't actually do those two things at the very same moment. What's actually happening is you're switching back and forth between things when we're multitasking. And information can get lost, there can be accuracy and delays, so that's sort of how that frontal lobe operates. Actually, I'm going to stop here. Are there any questions about this before we go on? Okay. All right, so now I want to talk quickly about the single neuron in the brain. So a single cell in the brain is called a neuron, and it used to be believed that children's brains changed a lot and grew a lot, but adult brains really didn't. Now we know that's not the case. And the term for the fact that our brains change all the time is called neural plasticity. So the connections in our brains change based on what we experience in our everyday world. So your brain tomorrow is going to be organized a little bit differently than it is today based on the experiences that you had and the learnings that you had in that day. And that's called neural plasticity. Pathways that are used more frequently are reinforced and get stronger and thicker and go faster. And other pathways that we don't use as often fade away. And that's forgetting. When we forget things, those synapses, the connections break apart. And learning is maximized when we are actively engaged and motivated by what we're learning, not in a particular style. So it's not as though each brain has a particular style in which they learn. We all learn when it's maximally sensory, when most of your regions are involved, when you're personally invested, when it connects to something you care about. That's when learning is most successful. Okay? Any questions about this part? All right. Now this science can get very technical, but my goal here is to be sort of general, to give the big ideas, to help us with this. Yes. Yes. Sure. Is this a, no. No. Hold on. Ah, there we go. All right, trial and error. So this is a neuron here. Thank you for asking. So this is the cell body at the top of the neuron. This is the long axon, and this is the end of a neuron. So where two neurons connect, they don't actually touch. This is called the synapse. And what happens is there's an electrical signal that goes down the neuron, and then the actual connection is a release of chemicals. So that's where the connection and the synapse is. And those chemicals, the fancy term for those is called neurotransmitters. So things like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. The balance of chemicals is what has to do with our mood, how we feel, how we operate. It's all about that fine balance of chemicals in the brain. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? All right. So let's go back to these. So maybe for 30 seconds, I want you to turn to the person next to you and discuss what you think. Are these truth or myth, and why? Do we have time for that? All right, I'll go quick.
I'd say that I'm reading like
Going okay? After they do the myth, though. Yeah. All right, time is up. So generally, are we leaning more toward the myth side or the truth side? Let's see hands for more on the myth side. What about more on the truth side? What about stuck in the middle and aren't really sure? 50-50? Okay. So here's the simple way to describe all this. You ready? They're all myths. All of them are myths. All of them are myths. And I'm going to give you the short version as to why, but I'm going to hang around after. If anybody wants to talk to me more, or any of my colleagues, please do. We realized we couldn't give you the handouts until we revealed the myths, because then you'd figure it out when you looked at the handouts. So we waited on that. And because we now know multitasking is a myth, I'm going to ask you to put your paper aside for a second and look up here. Classic issue that we see. And then, feel free to look, but I don't want you to miss this because this is going to be important. So why are these things myths? And this is very complex. And sometimes society doesn't catch up with the science, and we know that. But I'm going to try to take you through why these things are not so true. And then I want to move it on to my colleagues. The 10% idea came out at a time when we didn't really understand the brain. We didn't have great technology like MRI, fMRI, CAT scans, x-rays. We didn't really understand what was happening in the brain. And now we do. We have the technology to tell us we use our whole brains over an entire day. And this, colloquially is a little bit of a cop-out. If I could only access that other 90%, think how brilliant I would be. Truth is, it's all there. It just depends on how we use it. We have more control than we think we do. So now you enter into a busy world. We have technology accessible 24/7, and it's changing our culture. It's changing our habits, and our brain adapts as a result of what we do in our life. So remember the neural plasticity piece. Our brain learns based on how we use it. So we are constantly being distracted. The expectations of getting back to people immediately is there, and that is habit forming. And the brain is reacting. There's a chemical called dopamine that makes us feel good, sort of the natural feel-good chemical in our brain. When you get the ding of a text or the ding of your email, well, dopamine fires through your brain. And you're like, ooh, I like that. Ooh, when's the next one coming? Ooh, did I get an email? Let me look at my phone. It's becoming habit forming. So it's not our fault. It's just the way we're learning to have technology in our lives. And that's where multitasking comes in. So we want to multitask. Our lives are so busy, it's making us want to multitask. But the truth is, we can only truly focus on one thing at a time when it takes deep focus. Now, there are caveats, like if you're listening to music and trying to do something, if that allows you to focus and cuts out distractions, I wouldn't necessarily call that multitasking. But if you're trying to, listen to a presentation and write an email, you're not going to be able to attend to both in the very same moment. One is going to win out at each of those times. And then we see differences in people, and theories spread really quickly without evidence. That's typical of human nature. So we see some kids seem really creative, and some kids seem like they're really good at numbers and at math. And it's sort of accepted to just group people that way. Oh, I was never good at math, but give me an art project and I'll be great. Or, I can't draw, oh my goodness, but give me a table to fill out and I'm your person. The truth is, no matter what your personality is, you're using your entire brain. And there's a lot of creativity involved with being logical and analytical and vice versa. So this myth is particularly false on many, many cases. You use your entire brain, and personalities are not exclusive. You don't need to be one or the other. You can be all of the above. And then learning styles piece is particularly interesting to me as an educator because I think it comes from a good place of wanting to know how best to reach children. But this has been well researched now. There is no evidence to support that people learn in a particular way. And what's furthermore is when people are taught in that particular style, there's no higher increase in achievement. So this idea of learning styles actually has no scientific evidence behind it. And what is more salient is we need to learn in all of these different modalities and be personally engaged and motivated, and that's what makes for maximal learning. Any questions on those things? Because I know that's a lot of information. Okay. All right, so to wrap this all up, our brains are much too complex for all of that to actually make sense when you think about it. Each of our brains have 86 billion neurons in it. That's sort of on the scale of how many stars there are in our galaxy. Huge. And each of those neurons has on average 7,000 connections. And it's different for each individual child's brain. There is no one organization for each person's brain. And we now know that connections change 13% every 100 days in adult brains. So your brain is changing constantly, and we have a lot more agency than we think we may have. So to sum this up, why do we think these myths are so pervasive in education? Single theories or studies get overgeneralized without the evidence catching up to support it. The words brain and research are used very casually in education. Oh, this brain-based this, or this research-based this. We need to dig deeper. And actually, it's interesting, brain-based is very common in educator world, but it's not that respected in the science world because it's seen as a marketing thing and not as based in research, which we're learning. We didn't know this when we started, but now we're learning that. So if you see a brain-based something in education, see who developed it. Is there money to be made? Is it coming from a marketing company? Or is it coming from researchers or a trusted resource like a science museum, something like that? There is a weak pipeline for understanding and using cognitive science research in education. And that's where we're trying to fill that void. Our mission is purely educational. We want people to understand the research to make better decisions. So that's really where we're coming into this. And my concluding message for you, now that you have this updated information, and I recognize this is hard to do, I want to encourage you to let go of the outdated information. This is very, very hard. We've had a lot of years of reinforcing things that may not be true anymore. When we were children, the way that we were parented, the types of cultures that we've come from may not align with this information, and that's tough. But I hope that today inspires you to think about what we do now know about the brain, be open to some changes, and hear about some really inspiring work from some of the teachers in your district. And with that, I'm going to hand it to the teachers.
So ultimately, in our time at the Franklin Institute, we came across all this information and we thought it was fabulous, and we wanted to come back and use it in our classrooms because it was going to do these things for our kids. Obviously, if I have them for X many hours a day, I want to maximize the time I have with them, and I want them to be engaged and excited and really learning when they leave. But as a parent, I see the double lens in that I have them for so many hours a day and you have them for so many hours a day. And ultimately, if we're not all on the same page and working together, we're sending mixed messages to those kids, and that's not helping anybody out. So as we started talking and brainstorming, like, what do we do with all this information? It was clear that we needed to reach other teachers and work with the district to get the information spread within our own district to professionals. But it was also, parents really needed to be a key part of that partnership so that we were all on the same page with where we were going. So in our classroom, sort of on a daily basis, the things we're trying to do are connect to those prior experiences and make learning really not just hands-on, but also minds-on, and have them really critically thinking and reflecting about what's happening. Revisit ideas over time and realize that nothing's really departed and everything connects to somewhere. And if we can build from that, those relationships become stronger. And over time, we get that deeper learning. And we sort of walked away with like, okay, so in short, what are the things we really want anybody who touches these kids to know? And think about. And I guess the biggest change for us in our thinking was that as educators, or quite frankly, as a parent, I thought that you were going to get so much out of a situation. Like, kids were going to come in with a sort of something they loved or were good at or had a passion for, or they were going to have a starting spot, and that you would make change over time and they would grow, but by how much and what was going to happen was always a little more fixed, to be honest. And this idea of this neuroplasticity, and what resonated so much with us was that the brain changes by 13% every 100 days. So we can really be making these connections and digging deeper and changing the way kids think in that time that we have with them. And growth mindset has been sort of our attachment point for kids. It's something they have latched onto and really understood, and has changed what daily practice in the classroom looks like, and it's also changed what my household looks like from 5 to 8:30 every night. So we're hoping that that's sort of our entry point, is to give you a gist of what school has looked like and what your kids might be saying or thinking or seeing, and then how that affects the time that you interact with them at home.
So,
We got it. This mic.
who has like heard of growth mindset or fixed mindset, like what, parents, just as like a quick review or reminder, or for those who don't know, a fixed mindset is this belief that you are born with, innate abilities, and that there's really nothing that you can do. You're either good at something or not good at something else, and it's kind of like set in stone. A lot of times kids with a fixed mindset do not take risks. They don't like to be challenged. And we see that when they make a mistake, they see that as like the ultimate failure, and they don't see it as a learning opportunity. Whereas a growth mindset is the opposite. It's this idea that if I work hard and I persevere, I can really learn and do anything. And what we see are kids who have a growth mindset are like, they seek challenges and they take risks. And when they make that mistake, they see it as like, I've learned something new. Let me see what mistake I made. I'm excited about this mistake because that means that learning is taking place. So obviously our ultimate goal is a lot of kids, and including adults and myself, have like a fixed mindset. So we're being very open and talking to the kids in the hopes that throughout the school year, we can get them to change and change their mindset to be more growth.
So in thinking about this, when I first was starting to hear about this, I got a book called Growth Mindset by Harold Webb. And as I started reading it, it rocked my world. And it really made me reevaluate my life and my own thinking on things. And I even thought about back in high school, my thinking on how I chose different classes in high school. I shied away sometimes at some classes because I was afraid of that failure, thinking that I wasn't going to be able to get that A, because the A was the only thing that mattered and not the hard work and perseverance. So reading this book on growth mindset really has changed my views on how not only do I need to think for myself, but also how I need to create a culture in my classroom where I get the kids to persevere, and also really the same thing at home with my own kids. So in my classroom, one of the things that I had in my room is this poster here. Because if you go back to the other one, it's kind of general, and this is more specific to what it could sound like in the classroom. A lot of times, students want to give up. It's too hard. And say, something's too hard. And so I always say, remember, instead of thinking this, try thinking this. And what's neat from that is now students are pointing out to it and letting other kids know about it. And if they notice a friend of theirs saying, this is too hard, like, look up at the poster, and they're holding each other accountable. So I want my kids to realize that through hard work, grit, perseverance, that they can actually learn. So now this ties into the praise in the classroom. So Dweck and Mueller at Columbia, they did a series of 6 studies and over 400 fifth graders, and they gave them questions to solve. The first question they gave them was moderately difficult, and no matter the answer, and no matter the answer, oh, there we go. And no matter the answer, whatever they chose, whether it was wrong or right, they all got a different type of praise. Some kids got, you got it right, you must be really smart. Other kids got, you got it right, you worked really hard. And then they gave out another question. And that other question, regardless of whether or not they were right or not, they were all told that they were wrong. Then they were given a third question and didn't give any feedback. And what they found from this research was that students that were told, you got it right, you must be really smart, really led to a fixed mindset. And they scored lower, they gave up sooner, they had less enjoyment with it, they didn't want to rise to the challenge. Because that idea that, oh, I've been told I'm so smart, over and over again, but yet I can't get this, a wall went up, and then they decided, you know what, I just don't get this. People tell me I'm so smart, but why can't I get this? And they weren't willing to persevere to find the answer. So when they were told you worked hard, that led to more of a growth mindset, where they enjoyed it and they wanted to work harder.
The best part was we did this same sort of presentation for a group of teachers and parents, members at a curriculum council meeting recently, last week actually, and it was such an interesting social experiment because it was a really intimate setting and we were able to replicate the study. So we gave them the same questions that were used in the study and we gave them the same praise in response. And even as grown-ups who sort of in the back of their minds sort of knew something strange was going on. So we must have had an agenda. When you told someone they were smart and they got the next question, they're pulling up their laptops and they're Googling formulas and they're trying to figure out the answer and really not willing to give up. And then would say things when they handed in their paper, like would fold it up so that you couldn't see what their answers were. Or would say, don't judge me, as they handed the paper over. Or, I know I got this wrong, but here, you can have it. So that idea that if you were told you were smart, you knew that next time, you better know it, or guess what, the only option is, you're not smart. And then the people who were told they worked hard sort of tried and went at it and were clearly not as nervous and were just really trying to work through the problem and see what happened and handed it in happily afterwards, not knowing, sort of thing. And then after those 2 rounds of feedback the third time, people would really say, like out loud, as you took their paper, wait, you didn't tell me, like, how did I do? Or I walked away from someone and he turns to his neighbor and goes, she didn't even say anything. So if it holds true to parents or to grown-ups, it holds true to kids. They are actively seeking your feedback and are hanging on the feedback that's given. And we very casually throw around terms like, oh, you're so smart, or that's great, which have very little meaning and can actually set kids up for failure in the end and put things into their head that we don't want being there.
And to add with the study, it actually, kids that were told you worked really hard, according to the study, they actually wanted to take some of the problems home with them to keep working on those problems. Whereas, kids that, they're told you're so smart and got it wrong, they kind of just wanted to end it, let it go. But that growth mindset of being told you're working hard really wanted them to persevere through it and really come to an answer.
So because of all of this, we kind of left the Franklin Institute and we're like, okay, we thought about our own classrooms and obviously we have to change some things with what we're doing to better fit this new information that we have. So we kind of thought about the way school kind of typically is, like maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and kind of, what do we actually want it to look like today based on this information. So I think in the past, a lot of times we think of school as more like teacher-centered. The kids are just sitting in desks listening. It's not as much collaboration or group work, not as much like hands-on building projects, maybe like more like worksheets, like you're kind of sitting independently working. And then we tried to think about how we actually wanted to shift our classrooms to better promote this information.
So what you'll see, hopefully, in classrooms as you are in and around and hearing from your kids is that they're doing more of the things you see here on the right-hand side, which would be more of that. Instead of teachers telling how to do something, they're questioning how to do it and allowing for the exploration of that. In connecting back to the brain research and how the brain works, it's a more powerful learning experience if that student can sort of struggle and make sense of it on their own and question it versus being told it and just asked to sort of put it in there and make it stick. So more of that collaboration and starting with questions and working together. It's more about the experience than it is the end game, so that all of that learning happens before you get to the answer. The answer is just the verification of the process. So it's about the experience and the journey that the kids are taking and doing that together and really having the teacher, clearly still in control, don't be scared, but be more of the facilitator of that learning than needing to be the person in charge of that driven, like that experience. So we've kind of made the analogy with each other that where the destination has not changed, but the path we're taking has changed. So we're taking different roads to get there with the same end game in mind, and hopefully making a more meaningful learning experience for those kids in the process.
So a big thing that we took away from this and just thinking about the kids in our classroom is a lot of times kids think that success looks like, oh my gosh, like I just got this and it was amazing and I had no problems and everybody in my classroom knows exactly what's going on all the time. In like the reality, that's not what success looks like. And what we wanted the kids to realize is that the idea of like success is an iceberg. Like what people see is kind of like the top and everything, looking great. And we talked about like the Facebook effect of like you look on Facebook and everybody's in their family photo smiling on their vacation, but like seconds before everyone was screaming at each other. We don't know that. So that's kind of the thing that the kids think about success is that, I want to get the answer as soon as you say it. I don't want to struggle. I want to sit in class. I want you to say it and I want to be right with you and raise my hand and know exactly what's going on. And it's been this whole discussion of like, I say to my class, like, are you going to fail? And they're like, yep. And I'm like, all right, great, get started. It's that whole mindset shift of, in order for you to be successful, you have to do all of these things that nobody really sees or talks about, but that are the whole reason that we're learning, and it's what you need to do in order to learn.
And to piggyback off that, especially, in our classrooms, we really emphasize that failure is okay. We want kids to realize that they can learn from their mistakes. So that's one of the things we truly focus on is that, like we said before, the persistence, the grit, resilience. And when you don't understand something, well, what are you going to do to go seek out answers? How are you going to stretch your brain and try to learn more?
All right, so we, as part of our Franklin Institute work, have had to come up with our own, what we've called a journey map, sort of where did you start and what were the key points along your road and where have you ended? And we decided tonight to consciously share with you our sort of map of our journey and where we've gone in hopes that tonight is the beginning of your own map. So the hope is that you leave here tonight and tonight is your first stop on your map that becomes this change in how you view what's going on and interact and speak with your children at home. So you gotta switch it. When we had to sort of sum up in just a few words what our key takeaways were and what we think is important for working with kids, anyone who touches kids in any way, shape, or form should really focus on those bulleted green words. We're like multimodal in our presentation here, so just bear with us for a second. Growth, grit, effort, curiosity, creativity, and perseverance were words that didn't just become buzzwords for us or things to throw around, but things we have really internalized and tried to consciously use. So the idea that every day we're trying to grow, and we've really modeled that growth is not only student-based in the classroom, but we're there to learn together. I'm learning as much every day as they are. And in that process, we need to put a lot of grit and perseverance into that event. Learning is plain hard. It is hard to change and grow. It's hard to do school these days. These kids are being asked to do things that are difficult and challenging. And sugarcoating that doesn't help anybody. Like, let's be honest, it's hard, and we have to persevere through it, and we're going to do it all together in this environment. And we're going to do it in a way that piques as much curiosity for you as possible and as creative in terms of your learning, all while we all put in the effort to get there. We've also really stressed with them that effort needs to be a two-part. I can work really hard and plan a great lesson and stand in front of you. That doesn't mean you're going to learn. You have to work really hard to learn, and I have to work really hard to get good learning for you, good learning experiences for you to be in. So here's where it all started for us. As a background, the three of us sort of share a real interest in behavior and a motivation to do what we can every day. We're very driven people who are constantly trying to figure out what to do better and better and better. So our own motivation was really in coming up with ways to solve problems that we had in our daily lives, either parenting or teaching, wherever we were. And that was sort of where we started. We wanted to learn ourselves about what we could do.
And to piggyback off of that, I approach teaching in a way where, I think about my own kids, and I think about the kind of teacher that I would want my kids to have. And you all have children, and you want the best for your children. So we try to approach teaching is how can we give the kids that come into the classroom the best of everything we can give them, because if I approach it, what I want my own kids to have me as a teacher. So we're constantly thinking about how we can grow and be the best teachers that we can be. So what we did was then we spent time in a cohort, and Cliff already talked a little bit about that. And the professional development tied everything together that we had already been talking about in terms of growth mindset. And when we went and were part of this professional development with the Franklin Institute, we basically were talking, we're like, we need more, we want to do more. And so then that led to us, jumping into this opportunity to be part of the Master Educator program.
So we started over the summer, and is this on? Can you hear me? Okay.
We are not mic talkers.
Yeah, I'm not mic talkers. I'm like a loud talker. So we, this year, have started spending some time at the Franklin Institute every couple of months, and we go and spend the whole day, and we've been digging a little bit further into the information Julia gave you earlier. And our main goal this year is okay, we have all this stuff, so what are we gonna actually do with it in our own classrooms? How can we kind of revamp the things that we've been doing to make our lessons better and better?
So the first thing we've done, as we've told you, is that we teach growth mindset. We don't just use it in the classroom, but we explicitly teach it to kids. We teach them about how their brain works. They should be able to tell you that information is input through their frontal lobe, and that they need to rub their amygdala when they get nervous so they can calm down, and then it's stored in the back in their hippocampus. A lot of them have seen Inside Out, which we use as a relatively kid-friendly input for what your brain really does with information, and then it gets stored in these big colorful balls in the back of your head. And them understanding even how they learn empowers them to be a better part of that process in what they do. And so we use that language when we're working with them and try to really get them to be an active piece of their own learning.
And we continue to really make lessons that focus on the process and not the product. And, a lot of time, and I go back to myself, in thinking about myself in the past, I was always worried about the product, how I did, getting that good grade, and didn't think as much about, putting in that extra work and thinking, okay, am I really proud of what I just produced? So we're really trying to get the kids to understand that, don't turn in something unless you are truly proud of the product that you're creating.
So one of the biggest things that we took away from what Julia said was the idea of piquing curiosity before a lesson. If you come in and we have something set up and you are intrigued by it, immediately you are more motivated to hear what we have to say. It's not just standing being like, today I'm going to tell you about this. You immediately shut down, you don't care. But if you come in and I give you a purpose for it and make you kind of interested, then the kids are kind of, dying to hear about it. So we kind of thought about two things we did this year where we changed up a lot of what we had done. Like text structure is a really hard concept in 4th grade, and we usually kind of just start by just kind of telling the kids what it is. We were like, why are we doing that? They're not really understanding what we're saying. So instead, we put out a bunch of pictures all over the classroom and just said, go look at them. And they were like, oh, and they were walking around trying to figure it out, and they had all these ideas of what it was. We were like, well, maybe. And then one kid in my class and one kid in her class was like, I think all of these have structure. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, you got it, yeah. We got so excited, and they were like, okay. And then we related it to reading and put up reading stuff, and we're like, well, what structure is this? And they immediately were making connections and intrigued by what we were doing. Another day we did with the surgery stuff, they came in and we just had them put on surgical gear. And they were like, why am I dressed like a surgeon right now? Like I'm in full scrubs and like gloves and this thing on. And we did text feature surgery, and they had stuff and they cut them and related the whole message or the whole idea of text features to surgery. And it's something that they will always remember that they did in 4th grade. And we took this kind of challenging topic and made it something that they were excited to learn about.
In terms of math, same sorts of things. All of the subjects, the general essence you're going to get from this is that everything we do sort of through a new lens. So math is the same topic, same concepts, but instead of me getting up and showing you how to move yourself through an algorithm, I'm asking you to figure out why that algorithm works and to show me other ways you could do it, or why it works, or what happens if we change this, or do those numbers all relate to each other. It's much more discovery and question-based, again, still same end game, but it's less of me just telling you why something works and that, well, it does that because that's how I learned it, and it just works. And more, well, why does it work, and can you make sense of it, which is making more powerful connections for them. And then whenever possible, pulling in activities or things like that that allow them to do that.
So in science, we've really switched to challenging students to discover and improve science concepts, and kind of the same way in math, and not just teaching them about the concept, but actually having them try to figure it out on their own, not giving them a blueprint of something that they need to do or something they need to know, but coming up with that understanding on their own, and then talking about that understanding and those connections that they made with the real world.
Okay, so authentic learning. So this year, we started thinking about, our goal was like, we feel like we're preaching to the kids, like growth mindset, you can learn anything, you can make mistakes, and then like I'm this person in the front of the room who knows everything and doesn't make mistakes, which isn't true, but to the kids, that's kind of like their impression of us. So Catherine and we have a garden in our school that was kind of overgrown, and no one was really taking care of it at that point, and does anybody want to do it? And my immediate thought was, oh no, I've literally killed succulents this summer, this is not happening. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, why don't we just do it? I literally am telling you I know nothing about gardening, and I was like, let's just figure it out together. We told the kids, I know nothing, she knows nothing, you know nothing.
Build a pumpkin plant on my counter.
This is probably going to be a disaster, but do you guys want to try to learn together? And they were like, yeah, we do. And we're like, all right, cool. Let's tell me all you know about weeds. Spent hours in the garden weeding, all of us, out there pulling things. I thought it was a blueberry bush and it's a weed. That's how much I know about gardening. And we're planting and we're learning, and it's this great model of us showing the kids that we don't know everything and that we're not afraid to make mistakes, and our vegetables might not grow because they're already covered in weeds and we're not really sure why, but that's okay, and that we're learning from it, and maybe next year the garden will be better. But
and in the end, the kids were learning all the same concepts, so they were researching, they were extracting the important information, they were learning how to search for what they want, and then they were knowing how far down the bulb had to go and literally out there measuring to make sure the bulb was going in further enough to get it in there, or we had to buy wood and the teachers measured wrong, the kids measured right, don't be concerned. And we had to put that all together. So there was a lot of learning. On the surface, the controller in me had a lot of trouble when Erica was like, let's build this garden. I was like, oh golly, okay. But when you see the kids really doing it, it is by far and away the most enthusiastic I've seen them about anything. And they were doing the same content and standards that need to be taught in 4th grade, but we were doing it in this really hands-on way. We were able to have guest speakers come in. The kids have written persuasive letters to Longwood to ask them to partner with us. It was really a very rich learning experience done in a way that I did not foresee coming at all, and that I was in no way the learning expert in.
So one of the things that I like to do with my class is a lot of STEM projects and tying it to the curriculum, but really empowering them to create and come up with ideas on their own, and giving them a challenge to persevere through, because one of the things they find through these STEM challenges is a lot of times they're not successful. They fail, and it's a good lesson to teach them that failure is okay, and what can we learn from this? Where can we go from this? And so that's something that I really try to use in our school, in my classroom a lot. And then another thing that I'm getting ready to get into is Genius Hour, because through working with the kids and having a lot of conversations with them, they have a lot of great questions about the world in which they live. They're curious. And so I want to dedicate time for them to empower them again, to really find their passion and do research on their passion, and to inform others about what they're passionate about. So this time is going to be used for them to really find something they're passionate about and tell others everything that they learn about their passion. And then one of the other things that we did was
doing a lot of stuff.
is in our ELA curriculum, we have stories about how kids are starting businesses and using their businesses to help the community. So one of the things that we've done over the past couple of years since I've been at Chad's Ford is Shark Tank and Invention Convention, where they actually have to come up with a plan on something that they want to produce. They have to come up with a business plan, and they actually have to create a prototype and then present it to, have like a walkthrough gallery and present it to parents.
All right, so this is your moment. Ready? We're going to say how all of this cool stuff that is not, we're the three sort of silly people who decided to talk to you tonight, but we're not the only people doing these things. The great thing about our partnership with the Franklin Institute is that this information is being disseminated throughout the district, and these cool things are happening all over. In that same curriculum council meeting where we were presenting, we were talking about curiosity and piquing curiosity, and a high school student was brave enough to raise her hand and volunteer that she was in a class where they were studying Hamlet, and she had a sort of conception in her head that that was going to be scary and hard, and she wasn't looking forward to that. And when she got in, her teacher had an activity out with some character quotes, and they had to do an activity sort of figuring out and how these were going to piece together and what these people were going to be like based on what they said. And she's like, I just got it. She never said that she was piquing my curiosity, but I get it now. So this isn't just us. We're just the representatives here to sort of deliver the information tonight. This is the exciting stuff that's happening in all of the classrooms, in all of the buildings. And where we think you fit into this whole puzzle is that I'm better at making changes in school, let's be clear. But at home, I'm really working to put these things into play. It's very hard to change the way you parent and to cautiously think about the things that you're saying to your kids, because your emotions are running so high and you are so attached to wanting to do what's best for that child. And life comes into play. So yes, it's very quick for me to get your shoes and not let you tie them for another 45 minutes because we are late, right? But what message am I sending if I swoop in and I put your shoes on all the time? Or I'm so proud of you with that work that you did and that problem that you have, but when I call you smart, what kind of message am I sending? Perfect is my word, which I said to you again on the phone tonight. I'm really trying to let go of the word perfect. Like, what does it mean and why do I say it? But it's been so ingrained in my vocabulary that I have these little 26 police in my room that I've said, when I say perfect, you need to stop me. Because I need to stop saying that. That's not a real word. It has no validity. And that's sort of where we're hoping you meet us now, is as a parent, I am desperately trying to practice what I preach at home. My daughter's in second grade, she's 7, and she still does not ride a bike without training wheels, just because we don't yet. And she will say things like, I can't. And I say, you can't yet. Mm-hmm. The power of the little word yet changes the whole sentence. I can't is a very defeating sentence. You're not going to get there when you can't. You can't yet is very different. And a lot of our younger grades watch videos that are very kid-friendly off a website called Class Dojo. And I've started watching those with her at home and talking about the power of yet. And that you can't say you can't. You can anything. And I really, can't is an outlawed word in my house. We don't say can't anymore. We say we can't yet, or we're trying to, or we're working towards. Same thing, math is more her kind of strong suit, but she gets very frustrated when she doesn't get it. So she shuts down very quickly, There's a lot of tears. Homework is a whole new thing as a parent than as a teacher. I give it, I'm like, have a great night, guys. Oh boy, when you come home to it, that's a whole nother story. So it's been a battle. I give less homework than I used to. But same sort of thing. That interaction that you have with them during homework, you are getting a lot of things that you have to respond to. There's a lot of behaviors happening during homework that are symptomatic of what they're feeling in their head about how confident they are about what's going on there. And the messages we send when we do that.
You didn't want to talk. That's fine if you don't want to talk about my daughter. So that's my daughter, Faith, and her and her brother, Luke, they're twins, they're 2.5, and so we don't have the homework issue yet, but, it's even, when it comes to cleaning up their toys, and, you want to jump in and do it for them because their hands are so small, and you can clean up everything so faster, but in all seriousness is, really teaching them how to do that and not give up on that. And one of the things recently they've been doing is working on these puzzles, and sometimes they're struggling with these puzzles and they're like, Daddy, can you help me? And so I'll go sit next to them, but I don't do it for them. I try to talk them through it and let them persevere through it. And hopefully I'm teaching them something, even at 2.5 years old.
These are kind of other takeaways. They're a little tangential, but I think you'll follow it as a parent. I was actively cooking 3 dinners a night for essentially 3 to 4 people, depending on who's home, which is plain crazy. Why was I doing that? But I was trying to do what's best. I don't want you to go to bed hungry. I don't want you not to have what you're supposed to have. And after the Franklin Institute as a takeaway, I was like, I'm done. This is dinner. Yeah. Eat it or starve, and you're going to be fine in the end. Because all of that accommodating I was doing was sending this message that I don't really want to send in the end. And that idea of where is the balance between helping you and taking over for you and rescuing you and doing all this stuff that doesn't help you grow or think or change is a little bit off from the main topic, but really spoke to us in a lot of the discussions that we had from the parenting perspective. And that idea of smart. John has a great smart story. You're going to throw your wife under the bus here in public?
Well, she's not here, so yeah. My daughter was doing something, and she did something really well, and it was kind of like a brilliant moment. And my wife said, "Oh, you're so smart." And I looked at her and I gave her the eye, and I said, and she looked at me and was like, "Oh yeah, Franklin Institute." But but it's been nice to have that conversation because I want my kids to feel confident in themselves, but I also want them to realize that. I don't want them to hear smart all the time because then it kind of gets cheap. And I want them to realize that it's, more important to work hard and persevere.
Oh yeah, so that how hard did you work? Like I do a lot of the same prompting and questioning of homework or books she's telling me about or anything that's going on. Or my son is desperately trying to keep up only at the age of 4 and thinking he can do everything his 7-year-old sister can do. So the balance of equating all that home, and I make it much more about the effort and the process. Mm-hmm. So when she's riding him about he can't do this and he can't do that and he can't do the other thing, because that's what older sisters do to their younger brother apparently. We've shifted to not the end game, but about the process. So he worked just as hard to do what he did as you worked to do your thing. Are they the same? No, but both of the processes were. And so they're able to sort of praise each other's process better than they used to. And Erica's only going to raise perfect children after.
Yes, I don't have children, but I'm listening and mine are going to be perfect. So I've just written down all these notes.
So in the end, that was our journey, sort of, and where we've arrived today. We've been these transformed teachers looking at things through different lenses, trying to spread the message as we can, and really trying to, with children, adopt that message, and without children, prepare for the future of how to do that. And we're sort of, to summarize, the things that we as teachers are thinking about.
The main things that we've been doing are teaching our kids about the brains. Like everything that you've heard tonight, I have talked to my class about, and they're aware of like their brains and how it works, because I think it gives them proof as to why. Like I'm not just saying it just to say it. Like there's actual research behind what I'm saying to support it, and they kind of buy into it a little bit more. The idea of piquing curiosity in our lessons, we try to, I mean, it's not every single thing I do every single day is going to be this amazing, lesson where I like have this whole elaborate thing planned, but for like the really important things, we're trying to really stop and be reflective and think about what can we do so that these kids are going to actually learn and understand.
And I think, like, to add on that, we're more conscientious about doing that, about when we're planning our lessons, how we can pique curiosity.
Discovery learning. I'm not just going to stand in front and tell you what I need you to know. I'm going to pose a question, and I need you to get there on your own. And last, doing things in the class like guided math. We have flexible seating in our classrooms, trying to give the kids choice, to do things like empowering them to make decisions about their own learning so that they are aware that they are in charge of their learning. It's not my job for you to learn. You can sit in my room all day long and I tell them this, and I can talk and you can take nothing away, and that's your choice. Or you can come in ready to work and realize that it's up to you and that you are in charge of your own learning, and that if you put in the effort and you work hard, you will grow and do amazing things.
And lastly, that promoting that risk, we build a real community in there where taking those risks is acceptable and the challenges are okay, and then therefore they're more likely to persevere, and we're trying to push that language on them. And then what growth mindset looks at home, here's your part again. So reminding them that struggle is okay and that you can sort of let them struggle, and that doesn't mean you're not helping them, it actually means you're helping them. Like I use a phrase in the classroom like, I'm not answering you, but I'm not answering you.
I hear your question, but I'm cannot help you.
So it's not that I'm not listening to you, but I'm not giving you the answer either, because in the end I'm actually helping you when I do that.
The idea of letting kids fail and realizing that it's hard to do, honestly. Like if I have somebody who comes up to me and is like, I didn't do this or I don't have this, we kind of immediately want to like rescue them and help them because we don't want them to be upset and we want them to be happy and we don't ever want them to feel like they aren't being supportive. But being honest and saying like, oh, I'm at my house and I see that they left their clarinets and I know that they have band today, and I know that you're like, oh, they're probably so upset, and I bet you that they really are, in class being, realizing that they don't have their clarinet, but realizing that like, Mr. Miller's not here, so I'm going to say this, don't bring their clarinet into school. Like it's okay. Like they will learn a lesson. It might be hard for them to learn, but at the end of the day, they're probably not going to forget their clarinet again, and realizing that they will learn from that failure more than they will learn from us and from parents or from teachers kind of bailing them out.
The fake A speaks to that process, not the end game. To get an A isn't the value. To have learned something is the value. So if you knew it coming in and you got an A, we call that a fake A. You already knew it. So it's more about the process you take and what you learn. We're focusing on the growth versus focusing on the product. Same thing, teaching them that they really have control. It's not about your ability or your IQ or those kind of things you come up with. It's your effort. And we teach them a study that talks about two equally qualified people going into a situation and how the person with the growth mindset is going to outperform the person with the fixed mindset. So just reinforcing to them that mindset is so important to what they come across.
And finally, conceptual understanding is more important than procedural. The understanding procedures like in math, an algorithm to a multiplication problem, that's great, but do you understand what you just did? So really having the conceptual understanding behind it is really more important.
So keep in mind that words send important messages. So as you're speaking to your kids, think about those things that convey that fixed mindset and try to let go of those and replace them with the phrases that will promote more of a growth mindset. So the idea of the power of yet or figuring things out is what we want you to take away from tonight versus using those other messages.
Ultimately, what we hope that you feel empowered to do right now is that you are feeling like you want to go home and think about what you have heard tonight and kind of maybe talk to your kids about it. Maybe ask them if they have heard any of these things in their classrooms and discuss, and maybe hopefully you're starting your own journey. Talk to your kids about the brain and see what they know or what they don't know, and what they know about growth mindset or what they don't know about growth mindset. And then just try, like as we're obviously continuing to do, we're just trying to use those growth mindset terms so we are conveying the right messages to our kids so that they feel empowered and like they can learn anything and be successful in any environment. Make
sure you're focusing on the process and not the product at home, like we talked about, and continue learning about the brain and all of the great things that are out there, which can probably take us back to the Franklin Institute, where you're all going to go now with your coupon. Yay! It's like Oprah. Everybody gets a coupon. Yeah, I don't. Who's the un with?
Because I know we're running late. Catherine, will you shoot me through the rest of these?
I will.
Before I go, can we give an incredible round of applause to your teachers? I have to just say, every time I hear them speak, I'm fighting back tears the entire time. As a creator of the Master Educator Program in our professional development, I think never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined what they have put together. I am so incredibly proud of you. You are making this live and real, and I'm so proud of you. So well done to all of you. Again, yes. And a special thank you to the administration for supporting this work and being behind these teachers. It's not every day that you get incredible administrators who share a passion and value for this type of education and believing in teachers to empower them. So I also, a huge thank you to you. You're incredible partners. So, in light of how much we value our partners in this district, if you flip to the back of your packets, you'll realize that every single person associated with the Unionville Chadsford District gets a discount to come to the Franklin Institute, whether it's general admission, special exhibits, shows, programs. We want you to feel connected to us because you're important to us. So please make use of that. We have a great Terracotta Warriors exhibit. Has anybody seen it yet? Special artifacts from China, really rare. The Franklin Institute created an exhibit that is interactive. There's technology components to it, really a lot of fun. We have Game Masters coming up about the science of video games coming out in the spring, which should be really fun. We have memberships, we have workshops, escape rooms. Has anybody done an escape room? You learn a lot about people when you go into an escape room together. So groups of up to 15, it could be kids and adults, could be all adults. You have to solve logic puzzles to get out of the room. There's an intro room that's an island escape theme and like sort of a second level, an intergalactic escape. They're really fun. And of course we have our Science Festival, which is a lot of free events throughout Philadelphia and the region in April to celebrate science. So we hope you take advantage of our partnership. I will be around. I'm happy to answer any questions in addition to your teachers, and let's keep the partnership going. Oh, question. Yes.
I have a question.
Are you going to be our runaround?
My son's at Chadsford Elementary, and I just wanted to. No, I don't need it.
I don't know if
It's not
everybody
that
can
kind of
hear
question. It's not that kind of question.
I'll repeat. Go ahead.
What, do we have to show something when we go to the Franklin Institute? Discount?
Good question. So there is a code on your page. There's a discount code that you can use when you buy anything online, or when you call, you can reference that you're a district affiliate partner, and they should know about it. If they don't, tell them you know Julia and it's kosher. So if you run into any trouble, you can let your colleagues know. But there is a code on there that's just for your district. Yes.
Thank you. I applaud the efforts of the district and the teachers in implementing this cognitive research. But I have a question. I've been out of education for over 15 years, and I haven't looked at any standardized tests recently. Are the people who are making these standardized tests taking into consideration this cognitive research and implementing their testing?
So glad, John.
Can I give that to John? And this is my feeling. If you hear John Malone, he'll say the same thing. I think good teaching tests well. And that's really what it's all about. It's not, we do an assessment at the end of the year because the state makes us do it, and that's great, and it's a snapshot in time. But really, we've got a great curriculum, and then we have unbelievable teachers who put together amazing lessons. Kids are engaged, and you know what? At the end of the year, that tests really well. So that's my answer.
Thank you for a great presentation. Mr. Wagner, I now understand why my daughter did so well and enjoyed your class last year. And this gets to the question to both of you is how, obviously these three teachers have gone through the program. Have all the teachers gone through the program? What is the plan for the rest of the teachers to go through the program and start really implementing that? And no, because I honestly, I see a difference from last year to this year, and I now understand. It makes sense as to why my daughter was extremely curious last year and asked a lot of questions, and why she's not as curious this year. Not that she doesn't have a great teacher, she does, and she enjoys her teacher, but there is a difference, and I've noticed it. So that's really what is the path going forward, not only in elementary school, but middle school and high school.
Sure. So we have, already we have teachers at the elementary, middle, and high school that have been trained. This is our first cohort going through the Master Educator program. We have funding for another group of teachers to go through, and another through our partnership program, and then also with the Master Educator program. John Nolan and I were at the Franklin Institute today with Julia, with some other districts, and how we can grow this partnership. So it's growing, and it's really a grassroots effort from that stems from when the entire administrative team went to the Franklin Institute 3 years ago, and we're taking the administrative team because we've had turnover and the board to retreat this summer. So it's growing. So it's we have 300 and some teachers. It's not all 300 and some teachers, but it continues. And I can tell you what, just walking down the hallways, because I happened to be here at the cops on the day that they were doing that. It was just luck. I stumbled across that.
We were all gathered up.
Yeah, it's like, what is going on here? And so there were teachers doing that activity that haven't been to the Franklin Institute partnership because our teachers share, right? And you can't be in a classroom next to someone else and they're doing something really neat, like, hey, that's great. What is that? And they share, and really the word grows.
Yeah, as the momentum grows, the message is traveling. So, like, one of the things we're doing next is talking to the high school staff. A similar presentation to this. So it would be great if everyone, like, Julie's a guru and we're drinking her Kool-Aid big time. But it is expensive, so you also have to look at what else you can do. So we're trying to do as much as we can now that we've been trained to keep that word flowing in here. So in December, we're working with the whole high school staff to deliver.
And as you can tell, we're clearly very passionate about this. So even if I'm telling you regardless if you want to really hear it, it's something in passing all the time that I'm saying that we're saying that a lot of people are saying. So for sure, word is getting out and people are on board with kind of all of this information.
And if I could just add one thing to that, we are talking about a mindset to a large degree, growth mindset, and the fact that maybe I go to training and my colleagues are engaged in that doesn't necessarily mean that I change. By its essence, it may take time in regards to changing teachers, parents, everybody, children's mindset. We're really dedicated to doing it right. And it's really not going to be a quick paradigm shift. It will take some time. And we have standardized testing, we have curriculum that isn't exactly written in this way, but we have a lot that is. So I think with time, this isn't going to be, and John made the analogy today in our meeting, that sometimes things come through education as a wave, and we duck down, the wave goes over, and then we pop up on the other side, and we're exactly the way we always were. This really isn't like that. We believe in this, and we are really dedicated to making sure that we can engage our students in a growth environment with a growth mindset and have in-depth learning. And that's been our goal always. And through learning from brain research, we're learning how to be better at that, to understand that better. This really isn't new necessarily. I think we're getting better at it.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. So folks, if you would be so kind, thank you for all that commentary. If you would be so kind as to just take a moment, I know we're getting late, but we would love your feedback. There is a half sheet that was part of the paperwork on your seat. If you want to send it back to school and somehow get it to Cliff Beaver at Pocopson, I would be glad to get it in that way. You can send it to any school and they can get it to me internally, or you could just leave it on your chair tonight or hand it to me on your way out. It's just a quick couple questions, and remember, any additional questions on the back or any thoughts you had on the back would be very welcome. Have a fantastic evening. Thank you so much for coming out, and thank you, Julia, for joining us tonight all the way from Philly.